All right, so today we're gabbing with Vanessa Grigoriadis, who is a legendary writer whose work has appeared in the likes of New Yorker Magazine, Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, and more over the years. She's also the host of Infamous Inside America's Biggest Scandals, a podcast from the company that she co-founded, Campside Media. Vanessa, I've long been a fan of your work, and I'm so excited to get some time with you today. How are you?
Thank you so much. I am good, and it is wonderful to talk to you. I was listening to your Meghan Markle interview
Oh my
just
God, what did you think? I know that
so
you're sort of in
fun.
the Royals mindset.
Exactly. I love it. I mean, I just don't know when Omid's like, I'm not really a friend. It's like, well, you are sort of a friend, or at least it started that way, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's an interesting, I mean, you probably have such a good perspective on that, right? Because it's sort of like over the years, I guess when you've profiled people, are there certain ones that have sort of that you've gotten feedback that's similar to maybe what he's gotten over the years, which is like, oh, you're too in their ear, they're too in your ear.
I mean, normally it's the other way around where people are like, why did you sell her out? And I'm like, well, but I was just trying to write what I thought was
Right.
right and true, etc. But yeah, I mean, I had Kim Kardashian send me flowers after I wrote the piece about her. And I did think to myself, like, wow, I must have really
She
just
liked
like
it.
given her a big old hug. Yeah, I do like her. She's an awesome person.
Yeah.
I
What
think
year
that's
did you
that.
profile her?
God, I want to say it was like probably like 2013,
Okay.
14.
So sort of
So
right before the sort of mogul era of her
exactly.
career kind of took hold.
Totally. Like back when it was all still about Kanye.
Right.
You know,
Interesting. Yeah, totally.
now he's
Um,
like a distant memory.
kind of like a ghost in their life, honestly. But so Vanessa, I've been listening to Infamous since you started it, and at the end of
Oh, really?
2022, and you'll do basically anywhere from 2 to 6 parts of some
Mhm.
like some infamous story, and it can be like Girls Gone Wild or the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial. It kind of runs the gamut
Yeah.
in a really exciting way. And I'm curious, like I feel like your focus on podcasting has sort of come at the same time as like that's very much a changing nature in the celebrity profile, and sort of like there's a lot less access given these days, and they're not as like influential or impactful as they maybe were 10 or 15 years ago. How have those two things sort of informed each other? Like, because now that you're focused a lot on Infamous and things like that, I'm just curious sort of how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, well, I think magazines are in a terrible place, right? Like, I mean, it's just every time you think it can't get worse, it gets worse.
Mm,
You pick up some magazines, they look like a supermarket circular, things that used to have like Prada ads in them. And so with that comes like a winnowing of your access to subjects that want to talk to you because they realize like you're not actually that influential anymore. How many issues are you really selling? And of course, the rise of social media as well. Celebrities can put their own stories out.
right.
So, I mean, I really actually, speaking of Kim, I remember like probably like 5 years ago, I got a call from a women's magazine and they said, can you do an interview with Kim Kardashian for the cover? And by the way, this is a big women's magazine and you'll have 20 minutes and it'll be on the phone and you need to talk to her about sunglasses because she's going to like wear this pair of
Oh
sunglasses
my
that she's
God.
promoting in the cover photo. And I was just like, this is where I get off. Like this is my stop. I got to
Right.
get off this
Th-
train
this is the
because
crossroads. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
like, I was used to spending like, 5 days with Katy Perry
Right.
and like following her all over, going to her house, like,
Different
you know,
cities.
yeah, exactly. Watching her walk around in her little like Japanese slippers and like make tea for us. And then it's like 20 minutes to talk about sunglasses. And you're just like, I can't, like, why not do branded content then? Like,
Right.
there's no
Right.
difference.
Well, but I feel like it's this interesting kind of thing of like, they don't provide as much access. It's not as quote unquote important to them, but there are still certain really big celebrities who really still care about getting the magazine cover or getting kind of placement in legacy media. It's this weird push and pull, I feel like, but they don't
Right.
want to give the access. And I guess they don't
Right.
have to.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't have to. I mean, once in a while you'll get somebody who really wants to play ball, but generally it's like after they've had a scandal or something
Right.
where they want to come back. Still see in Vogue like a big designer profile, even though designers are not, as big celebrities as they once were. Um, I mean, I still think there are ways to do it. And like when you've done it well, you can really get a lot of attention. Like think about the Jeremy Strong profile that was in New
Totally. New
Yorker.
Yorker. Yeah.
He's
That
talking about
was
his character acting for Succession. It was like all anybody talked about for a week.
hmm
So you can do it. But for me, I just started to focus more on like, well, what is a medium where people want to hear stories,
Yeah.
right? Where they're not just like click, click, click. I have 7 tabs open. I read 2 sentences and I move on. And the awesome thing about podcasting, as you know, is like all you people listening are probably going to listen for this half hour. I hope you will listen.
Right.
But
Right.
it's like, you don't turn it, maybe you don't click to the next episode, but you definitely listen to that episode at least.
Yeah, yeah, or you do the series on Gwyneth, but you don't listen to the series on Nexium. But like, okay, but you're getting something. You're kind of giving something to everybody at some point, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like now I know this woman who was the real life inspiration for Regina George. So we're doing like the real
Love.
life Mean Girls and her whole story. She's actually sort of downbeat about it because, she's like, it was a very terrible time in my life. Which I guess is the ultimate revenge. But we pick things that we see sort of bubbling up in pop culture. And if I happen to have written something about it, then we can use some old tape recordings, right? So we
Right.
just Taylor Swift. I wrote her first Rolling Stone cover. So, there's not as much juicy in there because it's like Taylor Swift. She's 19.
What's third on cover too? Right.
Right,
Totally.
exactly. Unless you're a Gaylord, you may not. I mean, that is the one big secret.
Well, I wanted to ask you, I mean, did you see that whole thing about the New York Times piece? Like
I
that it's
did.
really that's kind of what people are talking about right now. What do you think of that? Because they put it under the opinion section, which I think was probably a
Right.
big it kind of shifted the categorization and the blame potentially. But what did you think of that whole thing where they ran a 5,000 word piece
Oh
of
my
kind of
God.
speculating about Taylor's potentially
So,
queer identity?
yeah, it's so complicated because on one hand, it's really distasteful, right? And when I started doing this, I mean, speak about Kevin Spacey, when I started doing this kind of work like 20 years ago, the lawyers would sit you down and say, never accuse somebody of having done a crime that you don't see like in legal paperwork, publicly available legal paperwork. Never say they did drugs unless, you did it with them, basically, and never say anybody's gay because that's their private life and you can't say that, right? And then there were always these things like, oh, should we out this person, right? Like, is that cool? Like, and certain activists would say, of
Right.
course you should do it, right? But it's so fascinating that we're now at a place where Taylor Swift is sort of public property in a way, and opinions on Taylor Swift are just so clicky, click, 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 click. Like everybody has one, everybody thinks they can get a click for one. Now, on the other hand, the woman who wrote the piece had a pretty good argument, which is that Taylor Swift uses a ton of queer coding.
Mm,
Lavender Haze is like, come on. I mean,
right.
please, if
Right.
you're not telling us, like her stories, her songs are always telling you something. And to say, I'm going to have a big thing come out and then on Lesbian Visibility Day drop, like, was it a tweet that's
The
like,
the
me,
me music
exclamation
video,
point,
right? Like
coming
this is all
out,
about me, right?
it's
Totally.
like,
You could yeah.
she obviously knows what she's doing. So then you get into sort of the thing of, well, is that appropriation and is that gross? Like, is that actually a ding on Taylor?
Right.
Right. And that is also icky.
It's
So it's
it
like the
yeah.
whole thing is sort of icky. I
The whole
don't know.
thing,
What
yeah,
do you
and
think?
that's why I mean, I was just surprised. One, I was surprised they ran it. I've never really subscribed to the whole Gaylor stuff because again, I just, we've all fallen prey to like kind of being part of those conversations of like speculating about celebrities' sexuality and things, but it always leaves me with that icky feeling, and so I just like overtly try not to do it. It sometimes happens, obviously, but like to run a 5,000 word piece about it in sort of the, the paper of record, like it just feels ill-advised at best,
Agreed.
Yeah,
Like very, it's sort of ill-advised. At the same time, like I think that it's worth bringing it as a cultural like
sure.
conversation. Like, well, what is she doing
Hmm.
in terms of like what is she trying to communicate through this? If it's not that, because it's almost like you shouldn't speculate on that, but be like, okay, is she trying to say I'm an ally, or does she just think this stuff is cool? Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, with Taylor, it's hard because she's on one hand, she's so open, and on another hand, she's so controlled. And that sort of dichotomy is part of what I think it keeps her so vital, which is that she works so hard and she controls her message and makes it so good, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's interesting because it's sort of like maybe the way in, instead of sort of centering her own sexuality, could have been like, yeah, is she doing this for the right reasons? Is
yeah,
she, sort of, is it pure intention? It's
yeah.
That's
What is
probably the
right?
less. Yeah, yeah. And so, you said you just ran a series on Infamous about Taylor where you use a lot of recordings from when you interviewed her when she was 19 years old. And, you know, I guess for people listening who have not listened to that, what was the biggest thing that sort of stuck with you all the years since then about Taylor Swift? Like, did you, she's in this all-encompassing sort of moment where there's breathless coverage of her every single day. I think you've said that like you knew she would be big, but maybe not this big. What
Yeah.
what 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 were your sort of lingering thoughts about Taylor Swift over the years since you interviewed her?
I mean, I felt that so I went to see her in Nashville, right, when she was living in Hendersonville with her parents. So I went to their house there. Um had no idea that her parents had any sort of trouble. Like they definitely presented as like, a very happy family, right?
Right.
Her brother was living downstairs, and it was like upstairs was sort of Taylor Nation, where
That's so
like
funny.
all the costumes and everything, and like downstairs he was like, okay, I gotta get down here. Um and I thought I loved her early work, like her Fearless stuff. I thought was great. I sort of liked all the plinky guitars.
Yeah.
I remember extremely vividly being at like Z100 with her, someplace like that in New York when she was doing a radio tour, and watching her just sign and sign and sign and sign and talk to fans. And she just kept it together the entire day. And like the only time I really saw her slip was when we were driving around
Hmm.
in her hometown. And she was telling me about her high school, uh, one of her sports teams. And she was like, they're named the Commandos. And then she like laughed because that was like a
Right.
very,
Right. Of course.
fabulous piece lingerie brand at the time, and or whatever it is, that or the other meaning of commando.
Uh-huh.
And the but I remember being at Z100 with her, and she and I think some number of like managers, publicists were talking about Lady Gaga, and Lady Gaga was popping just then in Canada. And she was like, she's coming here. Like, this is about to happen. Like, we need to watch this.
Taylor
And it
saw
was
it.
like, yeah. And I mean, and look, people who are really into pop music could have seen that
Of
with the
course.
early videos of Lady Gaga, but she's intensely competitive, right? Which she will say, like, that's again part of like what gets her up in the morning. She has to be the best. She has to do things perfectly. So I feel like I saw like a good number of the professional sides about of her, but I didn't see like the girly best friends with Abby sides of her. Like she
Right.
talked a lot about Abby, but I didn't get to see that,
Well, I wonder when she's in a situation like that where she's talking to a reporter, she has that hat on. You know what I mean? She has
Right.
the public facing Taylor Swift hat on. So I wonder if she doesn't. I feel like we haven't seen much of that at all. I mean, there was the documentary where we kind of got bits and pieces, I feel like, of that, but it's
Right.
she kind of code switches depending on where she, and on sort of what environment she's in.
Totally. Absolutely. And I think she's really like a she's listening to the old tapes because I had all the tape recordings of when I was with her. It was like 8 hours of tape
Wow.
recordings, most of which is very dull, by the way. It's like, let's make these cookies. Um, she is like remarkably open and
Right.
remarkably friendly. And, you know, she talks about how she gets dramatic and upset about like crushes not being requited or whatever. But you don't feel like that emotion from her. And I think that she puts those in her songs. And that's always what she said, right? Like, I sort of put this stuff in my song. She has a little bit of it's always a good time to meet me when you see me kind of thing going on.
Sure.
Right? And she then, like, her real, like, drama and emotions are sort of hidden with like a couple of very, very close friends and her songs.
Totally. Yeah, that's her. That's the window. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so Taylor's at this kind of unfathomable high right now, and I always get so nervous when somebody's at such a high that there's only one direction to go, which is down. And do you think that like I don't know, just from your observations of I don't know, similar superstars over the years, do you see sort of like a downturn coming from her, a rejection of certain cohorts of the population? Like what do you how do you follow a year that she's had of 2023?
Well, I think she's like with this thing with Travis. I don't know. I mean, it
Right.
seems unstoppable. Like, what do you think?
I don't see like maybe necessarily a downturn coming, but I think that you almost have to pivot because it's like it's been this all-encompassing nostalgia like kind of inducing moment where she's kind of looking back, and I don't know what looking forward looks like for her, but I think it has to look forward. I don't know if that's like, okay, we're with this guy, we get married, it's sort of this whole new era for her. I don't know, but
Are you
I
a
kind of
Swiftie?
I mean, I've been a big fan of hers, but I think that like I don't really identify with the sort of new age of fan that's like so every move is like a big deal and everything is like let's there's an Easter egg. I don't subscribe to that. It's more for me about the music, you know. um I don't know, but I think that she's just like a fascinating figure to try to you know
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of like I think of this 2023 as like the year of the girl, you
yeah,
know? And I think that there was an article in the Times that I thought was totally spot on, which is like it's never been harder to be an adult woman, right? Like again, I mean, I hate to be so old, but like, in the 2000s, we talked about like, how do you have it all? You can't have it
right,
all. You can't have a relationship and a baby and a job. That would be impossible, right? Whatever shall womankind do? And then it was like, oh, you know what? How about this? Just buy some really expensive aromatherapy and moisturizers, call it self care, and then you can work full time and you can have a baby and you can have a partner. And for me, it's like, and I should take care of my ailing parent. So, like, I'm in this like total sandwich generation thing that a
right,
lot of people are in as well, And that it's so intense. Like, to have that amount of responsibility, plus now also the responsibility of needing to look hot and young, which is like, I'm sure you've seen the memes where it's like, look at these people in their 40s from like,
yeah, it's like this is
like
what a 4-year-old look like
Eagles.
yeah, exactly.
Just like everybody's hair is dyed, like now, like a lot of people are on Ozempic, but whatever it is, it's like people are trying to have green juice and like green juice is super expensive. And how do you put gas in your car and the green juice? And you know, the having children, like, unless you make a ton of money, it's basically like if you're in a two income household, a lot of times like one person's income is just going to paying for that child, like the
Right.
child care and all the stuff you need to buy. So not to be heavy about it, but I do think that part of why you saw Barbie pop and Taylor pop is, and these things were driven by adult women. They were not driven by tweens, right? This was
Hmm.
not another like Disney Club, Britney, like, yeah, I love them. I
One
mean,
Direction. Yeah, exactly.
fine. Like Taylor obviously has a lot of tween fans, but like Barbie was almost like a little over my 11-year-old's head.
Hmm.
Part of why you see all this stuff is it's like wish fulfillment. It's like aspirational, escapist. Oh my God, I want to feel how I felt that day when I was 15, you
And I
know?
heard Fearless. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. And the screen door porch, whatever, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and you just feel really like you're back. She's very, very good at digging into the experience of being a young person, right?
Yeah.
I don't love like there's a critic who wrote that she's like a cyborg with feelings. And
I
I
don't
was
think
like,
that.
I
No.
was like,
Oh, you thought that. Oh, you thought that.
well, I mean, I think some of her later stuff, I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. Like, let's
Okay.
get the awesome video. Like,
Got it.
but I mean, they're great, great, great songs. But
I mean, there is this way
I
that
don't know.
she has to like compartmentalize her life in such an intense, distinct way that it feels almost inhuman, I guess, sometimes the way that she's able to do it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that you just spoke about sort of the nostalgia that she induces, and I just don't know if that's something she like wants to do every step of the way of her career going forward. You know what I mean? But like that sort of obviously has informed this huge
Mhm.
year she's had. But I don't know. It's who's to say?
Just to say,
Yeah, I want to sort of pivot because I think another sort of one of your most iconic profiles was the one you did of Britney Spears in Rolling Stone, February 2008, which was sort of the very tail end of that really chaotic period in her life right before the conservatorship was enacted. I reread the piece before doing this interview, and it's full of a lot of really kind of scandalous details, and it's very much informed by the people in and around her camp, not by her directly. And I'm
mhm.
just curious, like, what was that like gathering all the information? It was a circus around her at that time, and you sort of voluntarily went into that circus for a little bit.
My God, it was so crazy. Yeah. I mean, I was assigned the story from Rolling Stone when she hit her umbrella against the car. And at the time they said, okay, well, Brittany has no publicist. She has no management. She's not in touch with her family. Um, and like go forth. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I can't, how exactly would I coordinate this? And they were like, well, you just go and figure it out, which is a really bizarre and interesting thing that I think doesn't happen as much now in celebrity journalism, but used to be a big thing, right?
Hmm.
Like, go knock on some doors, figure out where she is, blah, blah, blah. And and so I started going around LA. At that time, I would go out a couple nights a week to like nice places, and I would just ask everybody who I met. I'd just be like, not like the maitre d', but like if I was having dinner with somebody
Right.
or I went to a party, I would talk to people, and I would just
Like
be
to see
like,
if you had a connection to
"Hey,
Britney, maybe. Yeah,
do you know anybody who knows Britney Spears?" Because there were people there who were working at like CAA or whatever,
totally.
and so I found this one woman, and she was like, I do know somebody who is like at this, like, basically like a furrier, like the Scandinavian House of Style, which exists to put like furs, I think,
Okay.
maybe on celebrities. And I met this guy, and he says he knows Britney. And I was like, oh, okay. And this woman was like the girlfriend never to be seen again of some person I barely knew, right? And and I was like, okay, well, we'll tell him I want to interview Brittany and like maybe he can help me. And she was like, okay. And so I'm like driving somewhere And she calls me and she says, he says he'll meet you. And I'm like, amazing. And she says, he'll meet you on this corner of Doheny and in Beverly Hills. I was like, incredible. And so then he's like, when? Now? Okay. So I like start driving over there. I'm like 10 minutes away. She calls me back and she's like, oh, wait a second. He says that you need to bring him $2 million. And I was
$2
like,
million. dollars.
what? She was like, he needs $2 million in order to go forward.
For him or for Britney? Who
For
knows?
who knows, right? And so I called my editor because I was like, you're not allowed to pay people, right, in the US. So I said, what do you think I should do? And he was like, why don't you just play that out? Because like we're not paying anybody,
But go
but
along with it.
sounds like something interesting is about to happen. So I called back and I was like, well, I don't have the $2 million, but I have like the contract. And he was like, okay, whatever. The woman said it was fine. So I pull up to this corner. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And there's this guy standing there, and there's like a navy blue, like beater Porsche.
Okay.
This like sort of good looking short guy standing there. And he's got a t-shirt that says fuck rehab. And I was
Oh,
like, well,
Lord.
that is the guy I'm here to meet.
Right.
It's like, no way it's not, right? And so that was like back at the time. Remember when everybody like carried around their laptop in a little laptop case?
Right.
So I had my laptop case, so I like pulled it out and he was like, is that the contract? And I was like, yes. And so basically this started like this whole experience with this guy and then different paparazzo. And then I went and I hung out at the Four Seasons at the bar because she was always going to the Four Seasons. She would
Right.
like pull out of her house, go to the Four Seasons. Long story short, I saw her in an elevator once. I saw her like I was in a paparazzi car. She was right next to us. And I was like, hi, but I never got to interview her. But I basically wrote this long, long, long piece
Hmm.
about the entire like Britney economy at that time and the way it was working in LA. Now, I have not spoken publicly about this, like in any of the documentaries or anything like that, because there are things that I feel bad about in that piece. Like I kind of put her down and made her sound like it was sort of her fault, quote unquote, which was not right. And I shouldn't have done it that way. It was like a very sort of Bukowski-esque way of writing. And it was very Rolling Stone and like,
Of
you know,
that time as well. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was just at that time we didn't talk about mental issues in the same way. I was more focused on like she probably had a drug problem, at that time, and that's what people were telling me. But it was fascinating. I mean, it was a fascinating, weird,
Yeah.
once in a lifetime, horrible thing for her. Really horrible. Really,
Totally.
really horrible.
Really
But
horrible.
interesting,
Yeah. No, so interesting. And I also just, the timing of your piece is just so, in hindsight, it's just so wild because it sort of came out. And then, like, right after that, it's sort of when the conservatorship happened and, like, sort of her life got on a total different kind of path. And I guess last thing about that is just sort of like, how does watching where her life went after that moment in time, like, how did that change how you thought about her? And I guess, like, I mean, the conservatorship was over 10 years, and like that, I don't know. I'm just curious how that impacted your thoughts on her.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for her. Like I really do. I mean, it's hard because it's like on one hand, when everybody was like free Britney, free Britney, free Britney, I was like absolutely free Britney from her father, right? Because we all knew that back in the day that, she wrote in the poem
He was
about him.
bad news.
It was
Yeah.
bad news. He was an alcoholic. He treated her badly, blah, 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 blah. But I wasn't so sure you should free Britney from like any sort of structure, right? Like in conservatorship, I mean, that's like an ugly thing.
Hmm.
Um, and it's very hard in terms of like it's her money, right? And she's been a singing, dancing like doll for it her whole life. And so anybody else putting their hands on her money feels like egregiously disgusting.
Right.
the same time, she needs some structure, and it was clear also at that time from her Instagram accounts that she was not well. So I think like as these things do a lot, the pendulum swung all the way over and it was like, free Britney, she's
Exactly.
great. She's
Yeah.
about to shoot a movie. Like, who knows what her next album is? And then she's like playing with knives and there's like little dogs in the background. And you're like, oh, wait a
Something's
second.
not matching up. Yeah. Yeah.
This is not like, it's not that simple, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, that's, a part of being a like a journalist, like an investigative celebrity journalist. It's hard on your soul because
Right.
like a lot of times, I mean, the gallows humor is like we're making our livings off of people who are mentally unstable. And then everybody can be like, "Oh my God, why did Amanda Bynes do that?" And you're
Right.
like, "Oh, I
Well,
have an answer."
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We're not like diagnosing, but like there's something going on. Exactly. Yeah.
Like something's going
Be
on, or like
sensitive.
Charlie Sheen. It's like, why is he saying tiger blood? Oh my God, well, he has like HIV. Like a
Mm,
lot of times you find out like there's something so horrible going on in this person's life, and everybody wants to go for the ride because it's fun to like sort of guess about it.
hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I didn't talk about like when I was asked to be on those documentaries, I was like, I don't think so, because I just thought it was like reputationally potentially harmful for
Got
me.
it.
But like I'm happy to talk about it now that it's sort of like
We're past the, yeah, yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
in the new phase of like, okay,
Well,
what
there's
the
more nuance. There's a little more nuance, I think, in the conversation around her, right?
yeah.
Because it was kind of all or nothing, I think, for a couple years there, and I think now it's like, okay, two things can be true at once, kind of
Two things
thing.
can be true at once. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the problem with life is
Yeah.
just
Exactly.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
the gossip just flattens
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's what
Um.
makes people fascinating. Like what makes people fascinating is when they have two opposing forces in them. The Taylor Swift girl and crying over the breakup, and the CEO who's taking vengeance, who's saying like bad blood. Like those are the opposing
Absolutely.
forces. And so many people have that. Um, but it's hard to get like a mob riled up.
I know. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm sure you've been at the receiving end of a lot of those over the years.
Yeah, that's not fun.
One of the other articles that I see it go viral once a year, I would say, is the Power Girls
Oh my
from
God, I
just
saw that.
it's
Yeah,
from
recently.
December 1998. It's this really fun article to read that it's just about this kind of this group of young women who were kind of taking the PR world by storm in New York, and they were kind of rubbing shoulders with celebrities, all these things. What is it about that piece in your mind that gives it such staying power?
Yeah, I mean, that was like the first piece I wrote, right? Like it was the
Like
first
number one.
I ever wrote. Yeah.
Wow.
And and that was a cover story. I mean, it's a story about these publicists in New York City who are young. They were like in their 20s, and they, were working for like super duper fancy fashion places. And just as a lark, they decided to make a girl who was like a shop girl at a dress boutique into an it girl. And they got her like highlights from Frederick Mackay, and they put her in Vogue, and she did like interviews her about her moisturizer and blah, 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 blah. And then, they were very close with all the socialites of New York City. And the shop girl that they had made into the it girl went and had an affair with the husband of the heiress to the duty-free fortune. And so then they like destroyed her. So it was just like this unbelievable
You can't
story.
make this
It
shit
was
up,
like
right?
so clueless, like it was so great. And yeah, I mean, like I have really made my career being a serious writer on very unserious things. And
Mm.
I just love like Edith Wharton and Henry James and like a social comedy and like something just like that's, Bronte's but funny, like everything that's sort of like set in a little Victorian house. I love that. Like,
Uh-huh.
I just love it. Like every Gossip Girl, like I'm shocked I didn't write Gossip Girl. Like that
Right.
is my milieu.
That's your
And
wheelhouse.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's Yeah, I mean, look, it feels really good to have a couple of stories that are iconic, right?
Yeah.
Like the Britney one and that Power Girls, the Publicist one, really are like things that
The
are read in
pieces.
journalism
Yeah.
school, and they're out there and they're really flashing, they're really fun, and I'm really proud of them, and it's awesome. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to, I mean, better than anybody. Like so many people write off your work as like, oh, who is that person, that unserious person,
Because
and
I'm
it feels
talking about
good to
Housewives and Bravo and
recognize.
things like that. Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. It feels good to be like, okay, no, this actually does have value. This isn't just junk food, for
No.
people to like read and then toss in the trash can,
Yeah. Well, I think it's like it's this thing where it's like there's a reason why things are popular, and then I think we should examine those things that are popular. And like I don't people
Yeah.
think that that kind of thing is just like so easy and light, but there's a story behind that thing that we're being presented. And I feel like, the PR story, and then you also did like a cover story about stylists a couple years later, and or several years later, but
Yeah.
there's this interest. I think there's a clear interest in sort of the teams around the celebrities, the people that sort of make up their armies. what
Mm,
what 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 interests you about those kind of people, the PR people, the stylists,
yeah.
the managers?
I mean, again, I think it is like a social comedy, like a drawing room social comedy. Like I always want to feel like you're like I want my stories to feel like you're at like an off-Broadway play. That's why I loved going to the ski trial because like
Yeah.
all like 20 hours were videotaped and it's just such high drama because you're
It's
like
camp.
the
Yeah.
worst. No, he's the worst. I mean, it's the camp of the year. And so the for me like the it's fascinating. I mean, working for Rolling Stone, I have to say, like being able, you have the sense that there's like an army of people behind every pop star. Like Taylor Swift has an army, like, this there's an equivalent number to the stands. The Swifties are these people who work for her. And it's just like not true.
Mm,
It's really like over and over and over. And look, for Taylor Swift, her parents were well off, right? Which is part of why she made a decent
of
deal.
course.
Big Machine. And also, like, she didn't get taken advantage of and twisted and blah, blah, blah. But, like, I mean, I interviewed Usher, and it was like, it's always like this. It's like the mom, who's sort of the manager, right? The best friend, the long suffering best friend from middle school or high school, who's now the assistant,
Sure.
right? The fabulous stylist, who is like sort of the most important person because they're like actually really close to you,
Hmm.
the main like boss bitch producer, right? Like, there's like these six people
Yeah.
and a creative director. And all that is happening is these people are on their phones, just email, email, email. She's going to be here then. He'll be there
Yeah.
then. No, he's going to be late. He's not doing that interview. This is the photo shoot. We're making sure he wears Balenciaga. And it's just really like having it's like having like a band. Like that's the band,
Yeah.
right? It's just those little backup people and their relationships. I think they're just really interesting. And how, when you go to interview Weezer, it's like everybody's really unhappy. When you go
Mm,
to interview like Justin Bieber, people were pretty psyched. Like there's a subculture to
right.
each of
Interesting.
these groups, and it's very much comes from the top, usually from the mom, right? Because the
Right.
mom
Right.
is actually in
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I am very nosy. I like seeing behind
Don't we all? You just
yeah,
get to do it for a living.
right,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. And like just like reality shows, it's like these are little plays, right?
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know?
They're little soap operas. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think of sort of, you know, this sort of really more modern version of celebrity where it feels like everybody is sort of famous just to a certain subset of people. It's all social media fueled or like reality TV fueled. Like, what do you think of those kind of celebrities or housewives? Like, what is your perspective on that as somebody who profiles the more traditional celebrity?
Yeah. I mean, the housewives, like the reality show thing, it's so hard to write about because people don't want to tell you anything because they're keeping the storylines
The
for
fourth wall up.
the
Yeah.
show. And the producers are sort of like, why are we doing this? Like, because it's not worth it to them. Like
Hmm.
now you can get Bethany. I mean, we could get Bethany on this call right now. Like, let's just call her up, like you can get these people.
Yeah.
But, and a lot, and look, I think the unionization thing is super
Me
interesting.
too.
Question of if they're performers or if they're not. And you hear these horrible stories, they're locked up, drinking, blah, 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 blah. Fascinating. Totally fascinating. I mean, to me, the issue is that reality is generally showing you reality, so they don't want to show you like the flip side as much of the reality. Like, oh, actually, I am playing a part. Let me
Got
show
it.
you my real life. This is what my real relationship is with my husband, and that's what I'm interested in, right?
Hmm.
And they really don't want to show that because that would mess up their image, which is supposed to be quote unquote real. In terms of like TikTok and all of that stuff, I mean, my son is like, can you DM Mr. Beast and please like do an interview with him? I'm like, I can't,
I don't even
but
really know
like
who that is. Yeah.
I mean, he's just like one of these
Yeah.
YouTubers,
Yeah. Yeah.
another
Yeah.
one of these like kid, sort of like kid jackass
Yeah.
style YouTubers. Yeah, like nobody knows who these people are. I don't know what to say about it. It's a fascinating conundrum because I have made my career talking about the biggest people. Like I only want to do it if it's the
A
biggest
list.
thing, super A-list, but not like necessarily, Angelina Jolie, like super A-list pop, center of the zeitgeist of pop culture. That's what I'm interested in. And now I'm like, well, who am I to say that this TikToker
Is not that.
the center,
Right.
right? Like, I don't know who's who now. And does it even like it's the fan culture that's so confusing, right? Like nobody needs me to go interpret what your favorite OnlyFans person is
Yeah.
doing.
It's
And if
also
I
like how many people actually care about that. It's just the people that are already following them.
exactly. And they want the experience. They don't want the critic coming in and telling them how, well, OnlyFans really takes 60%. And it's not really fair. This person doesn't make enough money. You know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah.
fuck it. I'd really like just the
Don't
fantasy.
burst my bubble. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So, it's like, well, okay, you could write that story. I think there is a great OnlyFans story to be written. But what is it? It's just a story in New York Magazine. It's for the sort of culturati
Mm.
on the coasts so they can understand this little subculture of regular people, and that's like I'm not into that. So
Hmm.
yeah, so that's why I think podcasting is good for now, where it's really like tell stories, put in your cultural commentary, but like make it fun. Tell
Right.
people about Gwyneth, tell people like we did Kylie's lip kits, like the
That was a good
Forbes
one.
writer,
That was good. Yeah.
amazing. Like
Yeah.
the Forbes writer who called her, the youngest female billionaire, which they then found out was not
They
true.
retracted. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, we try to both like in Infamous in the show that I make, we try to like both put on the play and give the commentary.
Yeah.
And it's a good
It's a fun balance. It's a fun balance.
yeah.
What are you thinking about for 2024 that you want to spotlight this year?
Yeah. So we are gonna do Mean Girls, we're gonna do Bling Ring, and then I think our next like big thing is gonna be Meghan Markle of
Yep.
the question of like, and I'm not sure how we're gonna frame it, but we were talking about like because I was a Meghan Markle truther from way back. Like I was like, I don't like her. I don't
Got
like
it.
this and bad vibes over
Okay.
here. And people were like, why are you so awful? And I was like, I'm not. I'm just telling you. I've been around the block and I'm getting weird vibes. And so we were gonna do something like, can you hate Meghan Markle if also the worst people in the world hate Meghan Markle? Because there's like a fair amount of racism
Oh, a
and just
lot.
like
Yeah.
royal, in the UK, it's like, oh, the fabulous family and this horrible interloper American, so we're trying to think of how to frame it, but Yeah.
Those are tough lines to, I think, skate around. But I do think that again,
Yes.
like we said earlier, it's like two things can be true. You can see that she was
Right.
mistreated in a lot of ways, but also see that potentially there was a long game being played, or they've misplayed their hand since then. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to to seeing how you guys how you guys tackle that one.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. Well, Vanessa, this has been so much fun. I think that we're
So
reaching the end
fun.
of our time. But
Oh
so
my gosh.
Infamous,
Amazing.
how often do you guys release episodes? Do your plugs before we sign off here.
Yeah, so they come out every Thursday morning and they're on like Apple, Spotify, whatever, wherever you get your podcast. It's called Infamous. And there's a picture of a woman with like her hand in front of her face, sort of like in a limo.
Lindsay Lohan. It kind of looks like
Here
Lindsay
they
Lohan
are.
to me.
Ooh, is that yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's her, but we talked about Lindsay Lohan, who is also in a weird spot. Going
Hmm.
to Dubai, go find Lindsay in Dubai, see what's up.
Yeah, yeah. She's kind of skating on the, but you're talking about Mean Girls. She's kind of skating on the Mean Girls,
That's for sure.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
totally. Yeah. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much. This has been
Amazing. You're the
amazing.
best. Thank
You're
you.
great.
Thank
Yeah,
you. This was
thanks.
so fun.
I want to gab.